Next on our agenda is the reports from the board members. Mr. Fox, could we start with you today, please?
I'd just like to report I attended Mr. Stannis' farewell get together, and it was a very nice occasion, and that's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Mrs. Cullors?
I did my monthly road check of South River District, and I just wanted to say, I saw Mr. Roush here earlier, but Mike Berry's here. I've been missing our Lakefront Rural meetings, and not sure when we're going to start getting back to those, but Mr. Berry, the roads up there look really good. The new asphalt and all, I thought everything looked really nice up there. So I wanted to give you a thumbs up on what you're doing up there. The only other thing I wanted to say, I was invited to and attended Warren County graduation on Friday, July 31st. Set in the rain, and you know, thank goodness for Mrs. Buckbuck. She was my 8th grade gym teacher when she started her career, and she's still here. And she took care of me. She gave me an umbrella, or I would have literally been soaked that day. But it was an awesome occasion. It was different. It wasn't what anybody probably started out wanting. But I think graduation is going to change after this. Even if COVID goes away, I think the parents and the students, that was such an awesome participation. You've got to be so involved with your graduate that I think they're going to want to incorporate that somehow. And they gave me this awesome face mask. All the students had them, and Warren County being my alma mater, I'm very proud to wear it. Went to Skyline on Saturday, August 3rd. Weather was a little bit different, overcast and sunny, and went from chilly and rainy one day to hot the next, but it was an awesome occasion too. And the staff on both schools did an amazing job of making that a special day for both sets of graduating seniors. And I have to say, Mrs. Jordan, she stood in that rain just like it was a sunny day. All that staff did, so they're all to be commended. And my best wishes to all the graduating seniors and their families.
Thank you, Mrs. Cullors. My report from the last time that we all get together, or had our get together, I've run all of the roads in my district looking for problem areas, and I found minimal things, made contact with anybody that I needed to at that time. I attended a Shenandoah Farms board meeting, and I've also attended the Shenandoah Shores board meeting, which was their annual meeting. Had 2 grand openings that I attended and participated in. Visited 12 citizens and had various meetings with various departments over the last couple of weeks, and had the emergency management meetings with Mr. Farrell and the departments that talked to us about what was going on. And I also met with the interim manager, interim administrator, before he took over, and glad to do it. And I'm also making it aware, as always, if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm available. And happy to visit with anybody that wants to visit. Mrs. Oates?
I'm going to take this down because I can't talk with it on. So I would like to say that when you're wrong, you need to admit it, and I was wrong. I was upset when I heard about the graduation plans because I have a senior, and I was disappointed that we were going to do a drive-in graduation. I had no idea, however, what they had planned to accommodate our family so that we could get an up-close and personal graduation with our senior. In fact, it was better than a conventional graduation, and I have to say my hats are off to everybody involved with this planning and the execution of the graduation. I attended Skyline on Saturday, August 1st with my son, and everything provided, including family pictures, my entire family, both grandmothers. That would not have been possible in a conventional graduation. We walked through what is now the new Hawk Tunnel, and if you haven't seen it, the Football Booster Club fundraised enough money. They've been doing this for quite a few years to purchase a tunnel for the football players to run through during football games. Well, the graduates came through the tunnel with their families, and on the other side there were photographs. And that was a very unique experience, and I, like Ms. Cullors, believe that COVID, the irony of COVID is that through social distancing, we were able to be closer to our graduate. And so I believe, like Ms. Cullors, that graduation likely will change because parents enjoyed the close-up and impersonal graduation. So I would like to thank the school system for what they did to make it a memorable day. I also would like to say that I've been driving through our roads as well in North River, and things seem to be very well in shape, and so I have nothing to report beyond that. I have been working, however, on the railroad issue, and I've received lots and lots of calls from my constituents and maybe some of Mr. Maves, and who are concerned about safety issues, and so I've reached to our delegate in the Virginia Assembly for some assistance, and we are working together to try to find a solution for everybody involved, and that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Carter?
First off, I guess I'll ask Mr. Farrell to come up and explain, and I know that Mr. May, you put out the updates on COVID and things like that. And one of the questions that I think I've seen, why have the numbers kind of gone down? I think at one point there was 8 deaths, and there were 7, now there's 6. And I think Mr. Farrell may be able to shed some light on that, if he could.
I can do that. I mean, it's the same one. It's the same reason. When we have a death that's actually reported, that death is reported in Warren County. After a period of time, we come to find out that person that died is really from Shenandoah County or from Page County or wherever. And when that's found out, we adjust the numbers. Ours goes down, theirs go up. And it could work in the opposite way as well. So what's actually happening is we're just adjusting the numbers of the counties for the correct number of people. Am I off on this, Mr. Farrell?
No, you are correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The other thing too is, and this would be, I guess, to Mr. Ham, I don't know if it was reported or not, I think it was, that the removal petition against the previous board has been basically non-suited or dropped, or what's the exact status of that?
It's been dismissed with prejudice with respect to the 3 members who were no longer on board, and with respect to yourself and Mr. Fox, it's been non-suited, which means it could be brought back in 6 months if the Commonwealth chose to do that.
Okay. Because I guess that there was some legal expenses that the county incurred on that, and I guess we've already paid all those.
Yes, sir.
And I didn't know if the rest of the board would. But anyway, because of that removal petition and the need to defend the board, and it wasn't just here, but I mean, it just kind of sets a precedent throughout the Commonwealth. And I think if ever, or very rarely, anybody's ever been removed by a petition. So anyway, the cost to the county taxpayers was roughly $48,500. So, and I assume there's 991 people that signed a petition. We cannot send them a bill for $50 each.
I don't have my billing information. I don't think I billed the county that much, but I know that there was a co-counsel as well, and
Right.
I don't know if you're including the
Yes, that was all
criminal
included.
offense as well.
The total cost for you and your co-counsel. So, but anyway, just thought that was, has that information on. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Next is our brand new interim administrator. You're 2 days into the program. You get to tell us everything that you know so far.
Well, that'll be pretty short then, sir. I'm telling you everything I know. It'll be pretty quick. I do have a couple of items, sir, Mr. Chairman. But before I start, I would like Brandy Rosser to make a little announcement on a project she's been working on for us.
Good morning. Mr. Daly asked that I do an announcement on the Assistance for Firefighters grant that I emailed you guys about last week. I am very excited to let everybody know that we have been awarded a grant for the purchase of PPE for fire and rescue in the amount of $725,454.55. The minimum local match required for that amount is 10%, or just over $72,000. While the amount does vary slightly from our original request, I have spoken to fire and rescue staff, and we are confident that we'll be able to achieve the original project scope with that amount. The award will be on the August 11th work session for discussion, with approval being requested by the board on the 18th. Just a very quick thank you to Chief Mabey and Fire Marshal Maatico and their staff for their assistance in pulling the application together. Thank you.
We'll have details for the board to review and discuss and question and so forth at the work session next week, but I wanted Randy to make that announcement. Into my second day, as you said, they didn't change the locks. I guess it was okay if I came back this morning. Looked at some of the files. We have 8 applications for the county administrator position. We have 2 applications internal for the assistant county administrator position. We are just starting to talk on Thursday night, Chief, with the companies about the fire chief position. We're having that meeting, I believe, Thursday night at 8.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so we'll do that. The Director of Social Services, we had 6 applications, and they have been narrowed by phone interviews down to 4, and we will be interviewing those 4 next week. We have, in anticipation of Virginia Broadband coming this morning, we have also been working on an RFP, and I know the board is working on a committee, but there's a short-term issue and a long-term issue. The short-term is, what do we do this next school year? And long-term is, what do we do for the county in total? And we anticipate that we will have this a draft RFP together very shortly. We'll go out this next week, so that you'll have something to look at that you might be able to do this fall. And then the committee can look at the broader picture of what you want to do in total. And when Mr. Farrell comes up, we will be talking about your allocation. And we believe, I'm very hesitant to put the money to broadband at this time, since you can put it into the county and reserve the money to go back to the broadband at a later date. You can use your own other funds, your own funds to do this. And then you're not under the gun time-wise. And I think that'll give you some opportunities to look at some things. Every week, the county recognizes people who have been working on COVID and have gone above and beyond the call to try and keep everyone safe. And this week, I'd like to recognize Human Resources Manager Jody Sappel, who has been working to keep everyone informed of what the county is doing as far as the reopening, and when we did reopen, to bring everyone in. She's keeping them apprised of new laws related to the virus and their families, such as the first Coronavirus Response Act and the new workplace safety standards. And she personally has assisted and supervised the temperature and symptom checks every day. She told me I could come back to work today, and we appreciate this very much. And this is in addition to her handling all of these positions that I mentioned there that she's helping with and coordinating. And we would like to recognize Jody for her efforts and thank her. very much. We had our first staff meeting discussion yesterday. It was a good discussion. I'm still going out and I will be out. I've met people here. I will now go out to meet them on their turf and we'll talk a little bit out there and see what's going on.
Dr. Daly, I apologize. Is your microphone on?
It was.
Could you speak a little bit closer to the microphone? I'm sorry.
Okay, let me try it. We will be coming back to talk to you in the closed session about the performance of the county administrator and what we can do to improve some things. With that, I'd be happy to answer any question and prove what I don't know.
Well, you know, what are you gonna do the next 2 days?
I've got plans.
I think you said it. How many applications have you had for the administrator job? Was it 8?
Sir.
And then when is the deadline for that?
I believe it's the end of the third week of August. I don't have the date here. I don't see
Jody's
Jody out here, but I
Jody's
believe it's we talked about it before, and I believe it's the third week. I want to talk to you about the applications in the closed session, but
Today? Or when you get them all?
I was going to talk to you about what I have right now and what I
Okay.
propose we should be doing this
Okay,
morning.
that's good. That's good.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask Ms. Rosser, if you will, is the Rivermont Fire Department on schedule now?
Yes, sir, it is on schedule at this time. We are starting to do interior finishes, getting ready to start landscaping, and we're doing furniture selections as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions at all here? If not, we'll go to our interim county attorney.
So many people have spoken today regarding the advisory referendum concerning the Confederate monument on the courthouse lawn. And last week, I had been asked by a couple of supervisors as to what would be the procedure for that. And I had written to you on Thursday. And at that time, I had discovered that if we wanted to be on the referendum for this year, then it would need to have we would need to have a court order entered by August the 14th. Now, of course, this board is not the court. So if, since the judge doesn't always work on other people's schedules, it would be wise to act today if you're going to do that. It is now on your consent agenda, and I had sent you yesterday a draft resolution requesting that an advisory referendum be held concerning whether to remove a Confederate monument from the courthouse lawn. Now, this is something that's got to be dealt with a little carefully. What I want to point out to you is that the resolution provides for what the question is going to be, which is, as currently drafted, should the Confederate monument located on the Warren County Courthouse lawn be removed? Now, when I wrote that, I did not realize that there were 3 petitions out there, one for removal, one for relocation, and one for keeping it where it is. I probably would have chosen the word relocate, which is permitted in the statute. The statute allows you to do an advisory referendum on the question of a proposal to remove or relocate or contextualize or cover. So I might suggest that you might consider changing the word, the question from remove to relocate. Because again, I was not aware that there was a petition to relocate in addition to a petition to remove when I wrote this yesterday. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Next thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. And as we had nothing before, to say that we had not looked at the minutes. Could we get, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the work session from May 19, 2020 as presented? Yes,
Can I
sir.
just make a motion, if it's all right, this is permissible, I think we've done this before, Have we just, I make a motion to approve all the work session, regular meeting, special meeting,
Yes.
all the minutes there between listed A through G. Do I make that motion that we approve all the minutes in one?
I have no problem with that. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have on page 18, the bottom paragraph, I have one sentence that it says, it's a quote from me, as property owner along the Shenandoah River, she agreed to a 25-year commitment which requires her to replace anything that they put along the river in event that it was swept away in a flood. That's not an accurate, I don't own property, my
Which set of
husband.
minutes is this?
Yeah, which?
It's page 18
Of,
of, oh goodness.
should be D.
And it's under
Right there.
H,
Bottom, right there.
it's not separated out, and it's,
D, ma'am,
well, mine is, that
June
is in,
16.
It was D, I think.
it's under authorization to advertise the public hearing in the Morgan Ford Bridge, that's on page 17, but it's under H for me, or maybe it should have been separated out.
It's at the bottom of page 18, correct?
Correct.
Where it says
I
you,
have it.
yeah.
You got it?
Says you're a property owner, but you're not a property owner.
Nope, my husband and my son own the property, I do not, and I'm not in a 25-year agreement. So I'm not sure,
Page 18,
How-
June 16, ma'am.
I have concerns about the Morgan Ford getting into a 25-year agreement, but I don't have a personal one. So I just wanted to make that,
Can we make that amendment to the, can we make that adjustment to the,
What would it like to be amended to?
yeah, how would you like to say that?
I guess you'd have to go back and listen to it, because I know I have a concern with getting into a 25-year commitment, but that sentence it's just not accurate, so
Are you suggesting that we remove the sentence?
Well, yeah.
Does it affect everything, or does it just, was a comment?
that sentence is just inaccurate, so.
I can go back and listen to the recording of this meeting, and then we can bring this set of minutes back before the board at the August 18th meeting as amended, if that will work.
Yes.
Thank you.
There's another one too, Ms. Charachi. It's June 23rd, page 5, and at the bottom, it is another Ms. Culler's quote, and it says, she then made the suggestion to maintain the course at lower quality than it currently is, to have it mimic the wild grassy courses from the 16th century Scotland on which the course is based. I think it was 15th century, and I don't think she said anything about wild grassy courses that I recall. When I went back and looked, I didn't see that. And it's based on a 15th century.
Okay. During the meeting, she did mention the higher grass and how the Scottish Highlands was unable to be kept because they didn't have lawnmowers at the time, so I tried to extrapolate.
Okay. I just didn't hear that, and I wanted to make sure that the record reflected it.
So can we get another motion to cover the amended portion?
Yeah, I'll amend the motion. The only question is on what Ms. Oates said. Does that need to be corrected at all?
Just change to the 15th century and probably just to, again, I'm not sure when you're quoting somebody, and this is maybe not quote, this is more of a summary. But I didn't hear that, and I just wanted to make sure that it was reflected correctly.
I don't think that we need to change that, then, do you? Tom, I mean, do you have a problem with it being
I
changed?
thought you wanted to go ahead and change that from the 16th to the 15th. I mean, what's 100 years?
You know, nothing, amongst friends,
Yeah.
it's nothing.
So I mean, I have no problem, you want to change it to the 15th,
Okay,
and that should take care of that one, correct?
correct.
And then let's pull the
June 16th.
D. Yeah, so I'll amend that to approve the minutes as presented with the changes, with the exception of the regular meeting of June 16, 2020, and that'll show up on a future agenda.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Any further discussion at all? Can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Colors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Oaks?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Motion carried. Next on our agenda is a request for the sub-allocation of funds through the coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security for the CARES Act. Mr. Farrell.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, as Mr. Daly alluded, we have two CARES Act issues to deal with. The first is the sub-allocation of the original $3.5 million that we've been talking about for a while. The second, coming later, will be the acceptance of the second round of $3.5 million. That second piece, we're only authorizing the three to accept the funds. We're not getting into breaking down that second 3.5 yet. So I'm going to read from the first allocation of funds. As you are aware, Congress passed and the President recently signed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act of 2020. On June 1st, 2020, the Commonwealth of Virginia transferred via EDI remittance $3,504,154,000 to Warren County. County and town Fort Royal officials concluded that the distribution of funds be based solely on population. Additionally, this group recommended that the county withhold $100,000 to fund the May 22nd, 2020 Chamber of Commerce request of $60,000 and to fund an internal CARES Act fund audit of $40,000. The county and town's portions are $2,127,596 and $1,276,558, respectively. During subsequent Board of Supervisor work sessions, it was discussed how to allocate the $2,127,596 that is the Warren County portion of the CARES Act funds, identify broad support categories and percentages assigned to said categories, and identify the agency that will administer the allocated funds. Should any of these funds not be expended in the identified categories, those funds will be discussed and reallocated during subsequent board work sessions or meetings. There is no cost to the county. All funds must be properly accounted for. Any funds that are not expended or that will not be expended on necessary expenditures on or before December 30th, 2020 by the locality or its grantees must be returned to the Commonwealth of Virginia no later than December 30th, 2020, and the Commonwealth of Virginia is entitled to invoke state aid intercept to recover any such unexpended funds that have not been returned to the Commonwealth within 30 days of December 30th, 2020. So before you this morning are two motions. The first motion does not include broadband. The second motion on the back half of this document includes broadband. So I would ask at this time that you all consider which motion you would like to make.
You don't want us to make both motions? Just one. Okay.
For review, that first motion is 50% of the money will go to the chamber to go to small business. We'll take 40% of the money and withhold it at the locality level for the first responder salaries. And the final 10% will go to social services to be expended on utility fees. In the second motion, it's still 50% of the money going to the chamber to go to small business. We then have 25% that will go for the broadband, as we've discussed in the past. 15% will be retained by the county for the first responder pay, and we would still have 10% going to social services for the utility fees.
I have a question, Chairman Hay.
Yes, ma'am.
Did we determine, Mr. Ham, if the county had the capacity to pay a private business on behalf of a resident with respect to this utilities issue? That was a topic that was in our last meeting, and I'm not sure that I ever received a final determination.
Yeah, I talked about that with Rick yesterday, and the answer is no. The original thought was that there are charitable arms of so it would be a foundation for Dominion Power, for example. And as it turns out, I think there's only one of the 3 power companies that has that. So the way this is worded is the social services that's giving the money. And social services, Department of Social Services is different from the county. And I don't represent the Department of Social Services, so it would be their decision as to whether or not they were okay giving money directly to individuals facing economic hardship. As you're asking the right question. The county can use CARES Act funds for that, but state law doesn't allow the county to give money to private businesses or individuals, for that matter, without getting something in return. Because, of course, the state law assumes all this money is taxpayer funds. And so, there is, of course, another way to do it, and this is something else that Rick and I discussed yesterday, which is you could give that money also to the Chamber of Commerce for their distribution. That would be another way to do it.
So it was determined in the last meeting, Mr. Ham, that social services doesn't have the capacity to write checks. The county does it on their behalf. That was my understanding. So they would not be able to distribute the funds. So we'd have to use another mechanism. So is that correct, Mr. Farrell? Is that what your understanding is too?
Yes, and that's, go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, because I just wanted to figure out the...
If I may, for just a second, ma'am, one of the ideas we had talked about, social services is not here this morning, but they have the utility fund, that they have some state money in that, and that's all been used. So the applicants could go to the Chamber of Commerce and apply there, and then those applications could be vetted by social services to compare who's already received funding, etc., from the original state funds. And then that list of those who would be eligible could then go back to the chamber to make the checks.
Okay.
And that was going to be our suggestion. Mr. Hamm's going to talk about the agreements, but it's part of the agreement. That was how we were going to work it. So the social services would not write any checks.
Okay.
And they would not have, you wouldn't have to go to social services to receive the application. The application would come to the chamber, and the chamber would refer them then to social services, who would vet them to compare with what they would be receiving and give the recommendations back to the chamber.
So how does that impact the motion?
So if you wanted to do that, you would, in the third bullet point, substitute the words Department of Social Services with the word chamber. And what Mr. Daly was alluding to, I have drafted 2 agreements, one for the Chamber of Commerce and one for the town of Front Royal, and they haven't been provided to this board yet because we're not done with them internally. And then, of course, when we are done with them internally, we have to send them to the respective other parties for their review. But there will be agreements that provide essentially that if something goes wrong and they distribute the money to the wrong person, then it's not the county's liability, it's that entity's liability. And that's the short way of putting it, but the longer way will be 2 contracts that will come to this board at later dates.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So let's say that a barber shop was impacted by this COVID-19 and they wanted to receive some help on their losses. So would they go to the Chamber of Commerce or Social Services? What would be the procedure?
Chamber of Commerce, sir.
Chamber.
Chamber of Commerce. And that's where they would get their application. That's where your,
Isn't that where they always start?
That's where a business would begin.
and that's where they would return it back to the chamber then.
That's correct.
Okay, that helps. On a layman's term, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Can I ask a question too?
Yes, ma'am.
Under a business that put in for the PPP program and were granted money for that, can they still come in to the chamber and apply for small business aid as well?
I believe under our current rule set they could. However, that might be prioritized by the chamber. You know, they would have to disclose other funds that they received. The chamber may re-rack and stack those applications and give priority to those that have received no assistance above those who have received
But
assistance.
it doesn't exclude them.
It does not exclude them from applying.
Okay, thank you.
Additional question? Do we have a motion?
Well, I would ask Mr. Daly one more question.
Sure.
With respect to broadband, is it your suggestion that we include broadband in this motion to?
No.
No, we don't.
I would put that funding in the count to the return to the county. And then when we talk about
To the
broadband,
first motion.
you would have a reserve that you would take it from.
Okay.
But that first motion in bullet 3 should be changed if, do we have to read this verbatim in order to get this, Mr. Ham? Or can we just?
I think what you could say, and if you wouldn't mind, Mrs. Cullors, I would like to echo what Mr. Daly said. I'm very concerned about you using it for the broadband because I'm afraid that it won't be built in time.
No.
If it isn't built in time, then, you've got a problem with the federal government.
No, I was questioning, should we change
Yes,
Department of Social Services to
understood.
chamber?
Sure, so if you wanted to pass the motion, boy, I understand how you're not gonna really wanna read it.
Well, if we have to, we have to, but.
We could do this, that maybe the motion would be, I move that the first of the two suggested motions be adopted, substituting in the third bullet the word chamber for Department of Social Services.
I think the motion should be read.
Okay.
Yeah, I do too.
I appreciate your efforts, but I think it should be read just so it is clearly stated.
No,
In the
I
minutes.
don't have a problem with that. I just wanted to make sure that we were okay with injecting Chamber of Commerce in there.
Yes,
This was read.
Okay,
it's the pleasure of the board, however the board wants to allocate it.
do we have a motion?
I make a motion, Ms. Cullors reads the motion.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, I move that the Board of Supervisors of Warren County appropriate the county's $2,127,596 allocation of CARES Act funding as follows. $1,063,798, 50% to the Chamber of Commerce, the Chamber, $851,038, 40% to pay for the portion of the costs incurred by the county for the compensation of first responders during the period from July 1st, 2020 through December 30th, 2020. $212,760, $212,760, 10% to the Chamber of Commerce contingent upon such funds being expended by December 1st, 2020 to provide grants to individuals facing economic hardships to allow them to pay for their utility fees and thereby continue to receive essential services. That the Chamber's portion of the CARES Act funds be distributed and appropriated to the Chamber contingent upon the Chamber using such funds by December 30th, 2020 for support for local small business expenses that are reimbursable under the CARES Act, upon the Chamber providing documentation to the county sufficient to prove that such expenses are reimbursable, upon the chamber signing a written agreement specifying and accepting the terms of such appropriation as stated herein, and such other terms as may be required by the Deputy Emergency Coordinator in consultation with County Attorney, and that the Chamber, comply with all other applicable laws, the United States Treasury guidance, and the county requirements concerning the expenditures of the funds, including but not limited to the requirements that will specify the timeline for the submission of such documentation by the Chamber, all determined by the Deputy Emergency Coordinator in consultation with the county attorney.
Would you repeat that, please?
Not on your life.
I second that.
Is there any additional discussion? Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any items to be pulled for further discussion?
I'd like to pull number 10. And then that is the referendum question.
I'd like to pull number 2 and number 3.
The gas meters.
Yeah, just kind of like to know how much money we're appropriating. Maybe get an idea, not the,
And number 3.
yeah.
I like for number 5.
Would it be easier just to say what items we want to leave on consent?
It looks like right now, number 1, number 4, number 6, number 7, 8, and 9.
I thought Mr. Fox wanted to pull number 4 and number 5.
Number 5.
Oh, just number 4.
Yeah, just number 5. Can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended with items number 2, 3, 5,
10.
and 10 removed for further discussion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Can we get a roll call, please, Emily?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Okay. Brief discussion on the purchase or replacement of multi-gas meter for fire and rescue department. Mr. Maybe? Our chief maybe, I should say.
I would say good morning, but it's afternoon.
Don't rub it in.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, what this is asking is for your approval to purchase multi-gas meters for our entire department, which is what we've been doing for quite a number of years. The gas meters that they currently have are actually, they probably outlived their lifespan about twice. They're now a 10-year-old old. It's gotten to where we're paying top dollar for repairs. Really, from our perspective, it makes no sense to keep those. We started out with 2 or 3 gas meters in every company. Now we're down to struggling and pulling gas meters from other companies so that ones who have been deemed non-repairable, you know, they still have that that piece of equipment. We've consulted with some of our surrounding departments and seen what they use. Probably more importantly is the state hazmat response team, which runs out of Winchester, Frederick. This is one that they recommend. It's one we got the prices on here. And we made a really good deal on them here, by the way. As we go down the list, we not only got the contract price off of Fairfax County, but they also gave us another 6% discount. So these went from roughly $3,300 a piece to a little over $1,700 a piece, which includes a charger and all for them to either mount in their apparatus or to keep in the station to keep it fully charged. We've cut the numbers down a little bit to save some money right now to 14 meters, where before we probably bought 30 or so. Big thing that we took out of them was like tanker pieces that very rarely ever go out, first out, on these types of calls. So the total for all of the department comes to $27,731. It has a 2-year warranty and a 1-year warranty on the sensors. And the sensors is what really goes bad unless you take this thing and you submerge it in the product or what have you. So that was a fairly good deal. Like I've said, that this qualifies with Frederick and Winchester and the state response team. I'd like to add too that due to the virus, we didn't really hold a meeting per se. We had an email meeting where we sent the information out to every company and every chief, and that they agreed unanimously to follow up with this purchase. I'll try to answer any questions that we can.
And in this thing, if I read this correctly, and that's why I called you up, so the meters you currently have detect 4 different gases?
Yes.
This will detect
Thanks
5?
for asking that. This is a 5-gas meter. And it's like technology changes as you go along and so forth. At the time, the 4-gas meter was sufficient. Now we've upped it to the 5-gas. And we've changed our policies and so forth for the safety of our people to where these meters become more important to us, because once we have a working house fire, before we go in and start digging it out, looking for hot spots or digging it out for the fire marshal to do an investigation, we're required by policy now to go in and take a reading inside, which determines whether our guys will do that work with a SCBA on, or they could take their SCBAs off and work.
Will this pick up if there's storage of herbicides and pesticides? Or does it just pick up, I noticed, I guess nitrogen, cyanide, those kind of things?
I'm going to say it wouldn't unless it's a flammable gas, because it does check LEL, which would check gas, propane, gasoline, oil, and those types of things that do have some type of flammability.
Right, well, I don't know how flammable, but I know with this being an agricultural area and that people do have herbicides and pesticides, I just thought that was something I would ask if that does pick it up, because if that stuff, even if it doesn't burn, it puts off a toxic gas, and would like to know that you guys have what you need to detect that.
Well, I have to be
I
honest.
don't know if they make one, but.
I'm not even sure they make one. I don't think these do, unless it crosses that threshold, again, of being flammable. And what it would take care of if it's a confined space, because it takes a reading on oxygen. Good thing too, we get a lot of carbon monoxide calls, especially during the winter, in the heating season, and it detects that too. So, but that I'll check on, but I realistically don't think that it does.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just want, I think I know the answer, maybe. Talking about the total will be $27,731.25, but then on the quotation itself, it showed $29,459.69. But then on the quotation itself, it also talks about getting 15 units instead of 14.
Right. We went back and revamped the quantity that we wanted, so this price of $27,000 takes off the $17,028.44.
1,700.
I was trying to get a little extra money in there. 1,700.
So total cost then for the 14 units is $27,731.20.
Yes, sir. And we're pretty lucky here too, because the vendor has a salesperson and a tech that lives in Strasburg. So for a while, if we do have some issues, he has been willing to take care of them on the way home. I mean, he's getting paid, so.
Do we have a motion on this?
I move that the Board of Supervisors approve the purchase of 14 multi-ray 5 gas meters for the Fire and Rescue Department from Safeware Inc. for $27,731.25. Funds to be paid from the cost recovery fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Could we get a roll call, please? Emily?
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Colors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Thank you.
Next item is the purchase of elections security software and services. Mrs. Tobin?
Good morning, maybe afternoon now. The House Bill 2178 direct the State Board of Elections to come up with a plan for minimum security standards for our voter registration system that the state provides. That meant that we had to develop, we had to do self-assessments, we had to develop the minimum standards, a written policy. They gave us very little time to do some of the things that we had to do. They had certain deadlines in place. They wanted the deadline to be March the 1st. Of course, it was like two parts. One was for the IT department, one was for the self-assessment and the written plans that we had to put in place. The complications was that a lot of localities were not prepared for some of the things that were cybersecurity that we had to put in place because they were very extensive requirements, and I can't really speak to some of the IT. I don't know if Ken Grant's here this morning, but he negotiated, they did the survey and they answered some of the questions. It was a massive amount of information they were looking for. So he actually, with their technician, did the survey. It was like a spreadsheet. They had to answer all the questions, whether we met or didn't meet those requirements. And they felt that their staff was not quite qualified to provide the services that the HB 2178 requires. So they, along with some other localities, I'll mention Shenandoah County for one, has looked at Assura, and he negotiated with them based on things that we provided to Mr. Grant, the information like how many computers, how many different components that might be covered under this contract. So I can't really speak to how they came up with some of this. They had already developed a plan to put in place this company, and they knew what the requirements were that they had to meet. So that would be something that our county could not handle as far as the IT department, because they're actually the school department. We just are assigned a person from that department to do our IT. So that's why this company would ensure that we meet those requirements. Of course, there's going to be some training that has to deal with cybersecurity, which we already have to do a lot of training on that. But they're supposed to monitor, our different things. There's certain things I can't talk about because of security, but there's a monitoring and things like that that would be part of it. And, Homeland Security is part of why we're here with this. We have to meet certain security standards, not just for the electronics and the computer side of it, but we also have to do it for all our voting equipment as well, but not under this particular thing. So we actually have to develop 2 different security plans, which we've already had in place for the machines for years. But we have to report to the state annually and update and make sure that we're in compliance with whatever requirements are there. So basically, the cost is part of the contract that was presented to you. I'm sorry I can't speak to that because I wasn't part of developing that. But I don't know whether, I don't know that there's any choice we have. Otherwise, they're not going to let us access the election system. And that's been the threat all along.
And this company would provide, they meet all the requirements of the state and so forth, so that
This company's under state contract, and it's my understanding that they already have a plan. Now, I don't know how that, I can't imagine that Mr. Grant would have even considered this company had they not met the requirements for the state. Because he's the expert in the IT department. I can only, I can't really speak to what all the requirements were for that. But he negotiated the contract on that. And I think it's very similar to the one that Shenandoah County basically has, but that will not relieve us of following the guidelines, and if they come up with a situation or a problem, that we won't have to comply with whatever the requirements are. And we will still have to meet that annual compliance with updating or reporting about our security plans every year.
So the simple answer that I heard you say was, we really don't have a choice.
We really do not, unfortunately, and we do not, they did not put any funds with this when they passed this legislation. So, I don't, if we want to do an election, or if I want to conduct an election, I won't be able to use their system if we do not have a plan in place with the IT and the cybersecurity.
Okay. Additional questions? Do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Supervisors approve the attached service orders 20-WAR-001-1 and 20-WAR-001-02 for the provision of election and cyber security for the upcoming elections.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Ms. Shiraki.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank
Excuse me,
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This election process is very high priority, and I would ask the board to consider inviting the registrar and Mr. Grant and his company, if they like, to the September work session to give you an update on the status of election November.
I make that a request as well, to also basically update us in general.
I would be delighted. I think that would be very important. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to have a tough election this year with a lot of stuff going on, and we need to know what you need from us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll be grateful to have that time with you. Thank you.
Mrs. Shiraki, could we put her on the, yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5. The authorization to advertise for a public hearing conditional use permit 2020-06-01, Robert and Colleen. I'm going to wreck their last name. Hinken. For a private school. Ms. Logan?
The applicants are requesting a conditional use permit for a private school. It's a private Montessori school at their residence, which is located at 1694 East Refuge Church Road. They are proposing to house the school in their detached 4,400 square foot barn on the property. They plan to have approximately 60 children and 5 staff occupy that space. They have been working with, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of this request at their last meeting, but the applicants have been working with VDOT and the Health Department. Mr. Beam and I went out and met on site with them and toured the property. It is a very nice barn. It definitely needs some upgrades to move children and staff into it for a school. And they're aware of everything that they would have to do. In speaking with them recently, it's not for this school year. It would be for, I guess, the following year, possibly, if it does even work out to have it here. But they do want to keep going along with the conditional use permit. A big thing has been their well and septic. The well would have to be monitored by the Office of Water Programs because they would be serving more than 25 people. So, and then the septic system, their soil is quite bad right there. So they've been working with Marsh and Leg on this whole report. I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have.
Mr. Chairman, I asked for this to be pulled off because what it appeared is that it's been overseen by the health department local, and typically something of this magnitude would require a commercial state inspection rather than local. And so I know that when we drill a commercial well, it has to meet much higher standards and it has to have a pump down and it's like rigorous tests. And so I just want to make sure that, hey, this is regulated by state rather than local. And so that was the reason.
Yes, the well would be inspected and monitored by the Office of Water Programs for the state. The septic system seems to be more handled by our local health department, and there's not a definite plan for that yet. So that is something still that applicant will have to work out.
Yeah, because there are a lot of concerns about using porta potties
Yes,
with that many children.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They have to have
That's all I
a
have.
permanent solution.
Now, should that test from the state be done before we approve this?
No, I think
They would have to drill the well.
I'm
As
sorry?
long as it gets done before it comes to us.
Well, I would, sorry to interrupt you, but I would say,
Sure.
I hate to make someone go through the expense of drilling a well and having it inspected by the state prior to even receiving a permit for the use that might not be approved. So anything such as the well, the septic, or any improvements to the barn will have to be done. We've always required them to be done prior to actually occupying the space and starting to use.
So before they get their occupancy permit, they're gonna have to go through this anyway.
They would have to adhere to all health department regulations, any state agency regulations, VDOT, and they're part of the conditions as well, but all of those agency approvals would have to be done prior to them occupying the space for our school. This is just the conditional permit for just the use, if it makes sense to have it in this property.
So they need us to pass this before they could go on to the other stages that you're
Yes.
talking about. And if any of those fall through, then this conditional use would be null and void.
Yes, sir.
And this is just to advertise for a public hearing. It's not that we're not approving the conditional use today. Right. I just want to point that out.
And this will be on your next meeting if you authorize it for a public hearing. And then the applicant will be here at the time as well.
Okay, I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize the proposed conditional use permit request for advertisement for a public hearing.
I'll second it.
Can we get a roll call, please, Mrs. Shiraki?
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Oates? Mr. Chairman?
Aye,
Ms. Cullors? Mr. Fox?
Aye.
thank you. next item is number 10, I think.
Yes, sir, that was for the referendum. Before, I had a couple of points I wanted to address, but before I go forward with that, I just want to make sure that everybody's okay with Mr. Ham's recommendation for the question to be on referendum, should a Confederate monument located on the Warren County Courthouse lawn be relocated as opposed to removed. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so when it comes time for the motion to put that on there, just want to make sure that. Couple things, let's see. Where to start? Okay, we had, just to address some of the random comments, we have 2 public comment periods on our agenda. One is for items that are on the agenda, and the second is for items that are not on the agenda. Because the referendum question was added to the agenda, that didn't allow for that first public comment period to be allowed for discussion on the monuments. Because I know some people felt like this was all a surprise or whatever, which it wasn't really. And again, some of the speakers that came here to speak on the monuments, they would have been able to speak on them at the second comment period anyway. So that's the way we have it set up on our agenda, to have 2 separate comment periods. And I think the reason that it kind of the referendum came up was because of a time frame issue. It has to be signed off by August 14th. We do not have another meeting till August 18th. So in the Northern Virginia Daily article, the one gentleman had said that the petitions were going to be brought to us in August. So we had to, at least, if we wanted to go forward with putting it on a referendum, we had to make that decision today. So that's what we did with that. Again, I think there were, the thing about the referendum is it is non-binding. So I think this is going to be an opportunity for people to address this. I appreciate the petitions that are out there for all 3 petitions, but I think the final petition in a non-binding effort will be the referendum, and then everybody will actually have a chance to voice their support on whichever way to go. And I think by doing it there again, we've got until November 3rd when the election is. I think there'll be great opportunities for both sides to commit to a dialogue and talk with each other and not at each other, and be able to hopefully have a better understanding what this means to different people. And with that, hopefully there'll be a resolution, ideally before the referendum, but at least this gives that opportunity for people to start to talk with each other and have a better understanding. Let's see. The other thing, like the one gentleman said, they want to bring a petition to us on the 18th meeting. And I don't know between now and then if the board wants to consider if we want to make that a separate agenda item, almost like a public hearing. Because as you saw today, we had roughly, what was it, 80 minutes, Roger, of public presentations, and probably about 60 of that had to deal with the monuments. So it could turn into rather lengthy discussions, which it could be a good discussion. But if we do it just as a public comment period, I guess be prepared to let that go a little bit longer, making a separate agenda item. I think we have 5 public hearings scheduled that night. So that's just something to think about between now and when the next agenda has to be approved, which I guess would be what, Tuesday, a week from Tuesday? So the 11th. So the board will be thinking about how we want to accommodate that option. And just throwing it there for consideration. No real no need to comment on that right now, since I just threw it out, but just people can think about it. And that's all I have.
So right now, we just have a need to verify, make a motion to move forward with this.
Correct.
Do you want to make that motion for us?
Sure. I would say, I would make the motion that the board directs Mr. Ham to pursue with the courts to place this on referendum for the November 3rd elections, with that change noted to change it from remove to relocate.
So Mr. Carter, you're moving that the written resolution be passed with the word remove, change to relocated.
Correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Colors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Thank you. I think that covers all of the ones that were on the consent agenda. Item number K, the request to increase the spending authorization in order to respond for COVID-19. Mr. Daly, Mr. Carroll.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. In the declaration of local emergency by the local director of emergency management due to coronavirus COVID-19, the consent of the Board of Supervisors of Warren County dated March 17, 2020, on page 2, paragraph D, authorizes a maximum of $200,000 in county funds for county and local government mission assignments and county and local response and recovery operations authorized and coordinated through the county administrator, and direct staff to seek to recover such funds pursuant to the Stafford Act 42 United States Code 5121. As the current authorization has almost been spent, it is recommended that this amount be increased to $300,000. The cost in financing to the county is an additional $100,000 in spending, with the exception of partial or full reimbursement. Before the motion, just as a reminder, these are the FEMA funds that Terry talks to you about and that we are collecting, and that we will seek FEMA reimbursement at 75% on.
The additional, the other 25%, is there a possibility at all for COVID funds to cover that?
We could, through the CARES Act or funds later, take that 25% back into the contingency fund to replace the entire $300,000 at a later date.
Thank you. One question for Mrs. Logan. Just so everybody knows how close we are to that $200,000 limit. I know that you don't have an exact number, but can you give us an estimate as to where you are right now?
Well, I'm still receiving July's expenditures, because I usually get those the first week of the month, following the month. But we were at 195,000 at the end of June, so it will be over 200,000.
Okay.
Probably the biggest expense out of that are going to be just supplies that are purchased for disinfection of public facilities. We have a good idea that the overtime, that hasn't been a great deal of money. And just the majority has been spent on just disinfection of all of our facilities.
PPE and disinfectant and stuff like that? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so
I don't
much.
have an exact number. I will at your next.
Well, I know that all I wanted to make the point was that we were very, very close.
Yes, sir.
And we needed to move that.
Yes.
Thank you. Could I get a motion, please?
I move the Board of Supervisors authorize and appropriate an additional $100,000 for a total maximum appropriation of $300,000 in funds for COVID-19 response and recovery operations authorized and coordinated through the county administrator, and direct the county administrator to seek recovery of such funds pursuant to the Stafford Act 42 U.S.C. 5121 et seek and any other appropriate funding source.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Any additional discussion? Roll call, please. Mrs. Sherlocky?
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Oates? Aye. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Colors? Aye. Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item is number L, which is the authorization to accept coronavirus relief fund payments, to agree to conditions relating to the same, and to authorize the execution and of the certification of receipt of coronavirus relief funds, round 2. Mr. Farrell?
And Mr. Chairman, this is the item that Mr. Munch requested in addition be added to the motion for approval, so I would like to present that amendment to you.
All right, thank you.
For whoever makes the motion.
Is the amendment just the name? Is that what that is?
Say again, Mr. Ham?
I haven't seen what you're looking at.
Go ahead.
And I would just explain, the proposed amendment to the motion is simply to ask the Board of Supervisors to authorize the interim county administrator to advertise a public hearing for August the 18th so that we can discuss the appropriation of that $3.5 million because it does exceed 1% of our annual budget. We're required by the Code of Virginia to hold a public hearing before it can be appropriated, just like we did with the previous $3.5 million. So it was just an attempt to go ahead and just consolidate that into one big motion rather than do this piecemeal.
Thank you. Mr. Farrell?
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon again. This is the second allocation of the CARES Act. So what we're going to discuss here is simply authorizing Mr. Nave, Mr. Daly, and Mr. Munch to accept the funds. I will then have to complete a survey. Once that is done and accepted by the state in about 5 business days after that, we should have that $3.5 million in the bank. So as you are aware, Congress passed and the President signed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act of 2020, the Act. The Act provides funding for a number of different programs to address the COVID-19 pandemic. A primary component of the Act is $150 billion in assistance to state, local, territorial, and tribal governments for the impact of the pandemic through the establishment of the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the CRF. Warren County's second and under current final allocation is $3,504,154,000, the same as the first allocation and is based on population. The county must ensure that an equitable share of the CRF funds it receives are shared with and granted to the town of Front Royal or the town. Just as with the funds retained by the county, the funds granted to the town must be spent in accordance with the same requirements and the same documentation must be retained for audit purposes. The county is responsible for ensuring compliance with the documentation requirements and must also ensure that the use of the funds meets the requirements set forth by the federal government and Commonwealth of Virginia. In order to receive the county's application, a new signed certification form must be submitted no later than August the 10th, 2020 to the Department of Accounts. The certification is attached. The county is expected to receive the funds within 5 business days following confirmation of receipt of the certification and upon receipt of a survey that is being completed by staff. This authorization only pertains to acceptance of the funds. You will have to decide later how to spend such funds. The cost of financing to the county, there is no cost to the county or town, assuming that the Act is complied with. All funds must be properly accounted for. Any funds that are not expended or allowed expenditures on or before December 30th, 2020 by the county or its grantees must be returned to the Commonwealth of Virginia and the Commonwealth of Virginia is entitled to invoke state aid intercept to recover any such expended funds that have not been returned to the Commonwealth within 30 days of December 30th, 2020.
Any questions for Mr. Bell?
So just so we understand, and I want the public to understand, this is a second allocation, which means we have received a total of $7 million from the state of Virginia with respect to the CARES Act to be distributed based on whatever algorithm we choose to distribute.
That's correct.
Okay. Then I move that the Board of Supervisors of Warren County authorize Walter J. Mabe, Chief Elected Officer, Edwin C. Daly, Chief Executive Officer, and John C. Munch, Chief Financial Officer, on behalf of Warren County to accept the second allocation of coronavirus relief fund payments, to agree to conditions relating to the same, and to authorize the execution of the certification for receipt of coronavirus relief fund payments, and authorize the interim county administrator to advertise a public hearing to take place at the August 18th, 2020 meeting of the Board of Supervisors pursuant to 15.2-2507 of the Code of Virginia to discuss appropriation of $3,504,154 of CARES Act funding.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I have two questions, maybe three. One is, and this is for Mr. Ham, because I know for the shooting ordinance, we did not have time to put that in. We did not have time to advertise that for the 18th meeting. Is there any restrictions on advertising this? Does it have to be done 2 consecutive weeks? Because I think the deadline passed yesterday. As far as allocation.
For a budget amendment.
Pardon me?
It's 1 week, 7 days before.
For this site.
Yes.
But others, sometimes it's more like 2, right?
Yeah, the safe answer for everything is once a week for 2 weeks, but this one I happen to know, and your finance director is about to tell you too, it's 15/2/2507, it's once 7 days before. If it's a budget amendment that exceeds 1% of your budget,
Okay.
which I'm guessing it does, since that's so much money.
I just want to check. The other thing too is, I don't want to get into that too much, but I guess when we have that, and you'll have that set up for us as far as, is there any additional money that the schools may want? Here again, this goes to the appropriation, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that.
So initially, I do have a request from the schools for $300,000 to procure 900 additional devices to go to the pre-K, K, and special needs populations to enable distance learning.
So when it comes down to it, we'll set it up with the pillars of money. We also have to decide if we still want to distribute this in the same fashion that we gave to the town, 1.2, 2.3, something like that. So that's everything we'll discuss that night as well, I think. The last thing I had was, and I think the way they've been separating it is based on who has a business license. The business license in town comes out of town's pot of money. It's from the county. The only thing, and this money can be used for nonprofits if they qualify.
As far as I know, we would discuss they can't qualify.
Because my only thought there is probably most of the nonprofits are actually located in the town, but they serve many, not argument made too for some business, but they serve people throughout the county. I can think of the House of Hope, Blue Ridge Opportunities, SAAA. So I don't know if we want to kind of readjust that to some extent, but that's what we can talk about that night. I just want to throw that out there for people to be thinking about in the meantime.
And we could do that as we amend our language for how we want to spend our money. We can include town projects. That's up to us.
Okay, especially the ones that serve everybody. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Could I get a roll call, please, Mr. Sharkey?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next thing on our agenda is our general public comment period. We've got about a 15-minute time limit. This is for the public to give input on relevant issues in the community which are not on the agenda. Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone signed up?
Yes, I don't believe Mr. Harper is here anymore.
He's gone.
Okay. Bill Long.
Good afternoon, Chairman of the Board, board members. I'm Bill Long, 4167 Rockland Road from Aurora, Virginia, Warren County. Also operate a business out on the north end of the county. But a couple quick things, since I didn't expect this, but I have been held up by the train, and I used to be a firefighter medic for Warren County, and I've sat in an ambulance waiting for a train to move, and I've sat in an engine fire truck waiting for the train to move while I'm responding to calls. And it's very frustrating, and, because we want to get there and help. So, yeah, it's terrible. I live out there and I get held up daily. If the train's not moving, I immediately turn around. If it's moving, of course, I wait for it to clear. But anyway, so my problem that I'm here to just discuss, I want to alert you to it. Supervisor Oates knows about it, and before Doug Stanley was familiar with it. I've been to the jail commission before, so when you get released from the Warren County Regional Jail, the RSW, they put you out any hour of the day or night, and the people walk out the door and they start walking south and they come to my business. And I talked to Danny McKeithen about it previously. He said put a sign up. So I have a sign that says if you were just released from the RSW Regional Jail, no trespassing. And it was okay when pre-COVID, we would meet them at the door and say keep moving, and that pretty much worked. But as your doctor's offices, my vet, places like that, we're not letting people in. We're pretty much going to just drop off service. We do have a little waiting area outside. And it's outside, and it's hot outside, but some people insist on waiting. We're pretty much by appointment. So the jail people, the people released, they're innocent until proven guilty. So the jail says once they release them, they can't do anything about it. Come over, and they ask for cigarettes. They ask for a ride to Baltimore. They ask for a ride to Woodstock. They want to get fed. We've paid for taxis for them. They want to charge their phone. When you get arrested, so you don't have time to turn your cell phone off, and when you get released, your cell phone's dead. So we offer to make a phone call for them, but they won't. They don't have any, nobody has numbers memorized anymore. So they don't, I need to call my dad. Well, what's your dad's number? It's in my phone. My phone's dead. Years ago, I offered to buy a cell phone charging station for the jail. It was $500, universal station, bolts to the ground, so they could charge their phones before they leave. And the guy before Gilkerson, I think, bought it with the inmates' funds. He said, send me the email, or send me the thing, and he bought it for him. He said, I'll buy it with the inmates' funds. But when you get released, they don't want to hang out. Another thing I don't think they're aware of is that they get a free ride on the trolley, but they don't get released when the trolley's there, so they start walking south. So I did like Doug Stanley did say that they haven't been a good neighbor, and that's kind of how I feel. The jail hasn't been a good neighbor. I don't have any suggestions. The other day we offered to pay $200 to a towing company to get a guy's car released to get him out the door. It ended up he didn't have a driver's license, so they weren't going to release his car anyway. So that got me off the hook for $200. But it's just it's a daily thing, 3 or 4 times a week. We just start keeping a log of how often it happens. And even one time this spring, there was a lady released, and when you get arrested, I guess I was a military policeman in the Army, so you are as you are. So she was in a Victoria's Secret nightshirt, flip-flops, and a thong, and it was raining outside and cold, and the jail released her like that. So she walked from the jail to my business, and by the time she got to my business, it was see-through, and she was soaking wet and freezing. And I just couldn't believe they were releasing people like that. Now, the jail superintendent said that's not their policy. They have, he goes to Walmart and buys sweatsuits and sweatpants and stuff like that. But, it's probably not getting from the top down. And these people were released, they have no money, no funds, no food. We've fed them before. And we want to be compassionate, and I don't mind it myself, but when they start asking my customers for rides, asking my customers for money, asking my customers for a cigarette, stuff like that, that's when it poses a problem. If I was a customer sitting out there, and that happened probably more than once, I'm probably not coming back. One time, okay, but and it's happening 2 or 3 times a week. I don't know if they could release them as the trolley arrives and say you're going to be held up till the trolley shows up so you can get on the trolley and get to town. These folks come out of there and they realize they're 35 miles from home, to Woodstock or Mount Jackson or Newmarket. And so it's just something I want you to be aware of. I know Ms. Oates is aware of it. She called the other day when we were bringing it up again. I've been to the boards and met in the jail at their meetings, and I think you were there the one time I was there last time before you were sworn in. But So it's just, it's not improving. It's, with COVID, it's a little worse because, like I said, we're not letting people in the building. Very frustrating. I don't have an answer, but maybe everybody can come up with something. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone else signed up?
There's a Samuel Porter,
He's gone.
but I
He's
don't
gone.
believe no one else is signed up.
No one else has signed up. Is there anyone that would like to speak about anything?
Jerry Maiatico, 157 Remount View Road, Front Royal. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, county staff, I appreciate the opportunity to just give you a few words. In particular, this week's been a really good week. Beginning of August 3rd, my birthday.
Happy birthday, sir.
But more importantly, August 1st. August 1st was a pretty momentous day within our Department of Fire and Rescue Services because ultimately it was the 25-year anniversary for Chief Mabee being the leader of our organization. 25 years ago, Chief Mabee walked into the door of an unorganized fire and rescue department tasked with consolidating and bringing together an umbrella organization to lead our volunteer fire and rescue departments. In 1997, I got involved as a 15-year-old volunteer, and I was pretty much given a training manual that said, this is a fire helmet, this is a fire coat, and we don't like the county fire and rescue department. They're trying to take over, run away our volunteers, turn us into a little Fairfax County. And ultimately, we know today that that is certainly not the direction that Chief Mabee has provided our combination fire and rescue system. We also understand that Chief Mabee has announced his retirement. I certainly know that if it wasn't for the VRS mandated requirements of a retirement of the age of 70, not tell anyone his age, that he would still continue to lead our department as long as he possibly could. Chief, on behalf of certainly my career, I want to thank you for being a true leader, a true friend, but more importantly, a true mentor in my career and many careers of many other people. So I want to say thank you. That's all.
Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone else signed up?
No, sir.
Does anyone else like to speak on any subject? If no one would like to speak, we'll close the public comment period down. And looking for a motion to move us into close.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Before you do that, could I ask the county attorney a question regarding the referendum? And it's really brief.
Yes,
Because
sir.
I know there's been other, and I just want to make it clear for us as well. I know there's been referendums in the past, consolidation, wheels tax, and those. My understanding that at least this board, as a group or officially, we cannot really take a position for or against the referendum. Is that correct? You need to research if you can, but that's my understanding. And I don't know.
You're talking about whether or not you could lobby for or against it?
Correct.
On a personal capacity?
Not on a personal, on a board capacity. And there again, it's hard to separate a board member and a personal member. But I just remember seeing things before that the board could not really come out and lobby one way or the other.
We should, go ahead.
Right, I'm not sure what the answer to that would be, but, ultimately, I don't know why the board would need to lobby one way or the other, because the voters could say X, and this board could decide Y. It's an advisory referendum.
I understand that, but this board could also have some sway on some people if they came out one way or the other. So I think it should be totally neutral from this board's position. And maybe what you can do, and I didn't mean to spring this on you, but maybe you'll have an opportunity to research it and see what the statutes say.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to do that. That's a novel question for me, so.
Yeah. Could I get a motion to move us into closed session, please?
I move the board enter into a closed meeting under the provisions of section 2.2 3711A1 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act for the discussion or consideration of the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, and resignation of specific public officers, appointees, and employees of the public body. I further move that the discussion be limited to the Emergency Management Services, the Economic Development Authority, Board of Directors, and the Interim County Administrator. I also move the board enter into a closed meeting under provisions of Section 2.23711A3 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act for discussions concerning the acquisition of property for a public purpose. I further move that the discussion be limited to property located in the South River Magisterial District outside of the limits of the town of Fort Lauderdale. I also move the board enter into a closed meeting under the provisions of Section 2.2-3711A5 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act for the discussion concerning a prospective business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry's interest in locating its facility in the community. I further move that discussion be limited to the prospective business located in the Fort Magisterial District outside of the limits of the town of Fort Lauderdale. I also move the board enter into a closed meeting under provisions of Sections 2.2-3711A7 and A8 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act for consultation with legal counsel pertaining to the actual or probable litigation and the provision of legal advice regarding Berry versus Federico et al. Finally, I move the board enter into a closed meeting under the provision of Sections 2.2-3711A7 and A8 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act for consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation and the provision of legal advice regarding the Industrial Development Authority of the Town of Fort Lauderdale and the County of Warren, Virginia, the EDA, the Town of Fort Lauderdale, the EDA versus Jennifer McDonald et al., the Town of Fort Lauderdale versus the EDA et al., and other potential claims and litigation relating to other possible liabilities of the EDA and the recovery of EDA funds and assets.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any additional comments or concerns? Can we get a roll call, please? Mrs. Shiraki?
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Oates? Aye. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Colors? Aye. Mr. Fox?
Aye.
We're in closed session. Who wants to read us out? And back in.
I move that the board certifies to the best of each member's knowledge only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under sections 2.2-3711A1, A3, A5, A7, and A8 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the public body.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? We're now back in regular
I
session.
think you need to have a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're correct. Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a roll call, please?
yeah.
She's
Oh,
not here.
Okay.
Mrs. Jody, may we get a roll
Sure.
call, please?
Mr. Fox?
Okay, we have a motion and a second on that?
Yes, we did.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Mrs. Colors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mrs. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Any concerns? Can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Mrs. Oates? Aye. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mrs. Colors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.